Okay, so you guys should be able to see my screen. Alright. So this is where we left off last class. Literally, last thing we did was kind of, looked at some of the ways that we could, do some decent stills and stuff out of it. So today what we're going to do is we're just going to unwrap our low poly, and I'll show you some of those techniques to unwrapping the low poly to make sure that we're using as much texel density as much as possible without wasting space. So that is the idea of today's lecture. All right, so let us let's see. Let me go here and let's go back to default shading. Let's turn off high quality. We don't need it right now. All right, but this is our high poly model, and by itself, we're just, if you look at it, it's about it's pretty expensive itself. But this is calculating for everything else in the scene as well. But this is pretty high count for a high poly, and let's unhide all, and then let's just look at our low poly here. So our low poly, oh, that's funny. Select all the things that are what I want. I'm just doing Alt Q to. Okay. So let me change the color of our low poly just so you guys can see it a little bit better. And I recommend you guys doing this as well whenever you guys are working on one. Just changing the color of the low poly will show you, a lot about the model. Let me clear the smoothing groups and just add the one, clear all. Alright, just to make sure our smoothing groups are nice and ready to go. Alright, so we have our low poly coin here. What I'm going to do first of all is I'm going to shift drag once again, just make a copy just in case. I always tell you guys that I like to make duplicates just in case I do something that I don't like and I want to go back, and this is just following on with that philosophy. I'm going to convert this to an editable poly, which essentially just collapse everything. If you took everything in like Photoshop, collapsed all your layers into one, this is essentially what we're doing in 3D. We're just collapsing all of that information into one thing. All the things we've done right in our edit poly stacks, right, we just collapse it into one edit poly. It says, all right, he's done, he's ready to move on. All right, so the next thing I do here is just grab our unwrap UV. No, actually, before you do that, do a UV mapping clear, and this is just going to clear out all of the previous UVs and give it to you black. It's like resetting everything in your UV. So then I'm going to convert that to an editable poly, which collapses that into there, and now I'll add my unwrap UVW. All right, so I'm going to hit open on my keyboard, and just like that. So it comes in like that where it's flat, right? But we know from our, the work we've done that it's a 3D object, right? So that's what we're going to try to do here. So I'll show you what I'm essentially doing here, which is I'm going to select one of my edges here, right? The idea of this is for you to imagine laying it out flat. Like imagine if you have a box and you wanted to paint on it seamlessly. Like you have a 3D box, or like imagine like an Amazon shipping box if you had one, and you wanted to paint on it, and it's you know, you're thinking, man, it's going to be hard for me to paint over the edges or over the corners, you know, so you find a solution. The solution would be to kind of unravel the box, right? Break it down, right? And then lay it all flat. Paint what you've got to paint on the Amazon box, right? So everything looks seamless, it flows, it looks good, right? And then you bring it back together, right? And then you put the box back together, and now you have this kind of seamless design. It's just easier for us to work in. And that's pretty much the idea of unwrapping. Is we want to take what we have, lay everything out flat in a cohesive way that makes sense for us with, you know, relation to the model, relation to whatever's going on in your scene or your, you know what I'm saying? So you want to think about that. And then you also want to think about the amount of texture density you're using, or texel density is how they refer to it inside of Substance Painter, the texel density. Well, I don't even think they made up the term. It's just an industry term, or the computer science-y term for it. So I'm going to select those two edges. I'm going to break them, right? So that's just going to separate that from it. And now I'm going to select this guy right here, right? And if you look down here, it's like if you were out in your edit poly and you have your selection modes, you have your vertex selection, you've got your edge selection, you've got your polygon selection, and then you've got your element selection, which selects everything. Right, what I'm doing right now is placing seams. This pink line that I created, it's just a seam, right? And this seam is imagine if it was like clothing. That's where it would get put back together. All right, so that's the idea of this stuff. So this would be the front or back, depending on what you think the front or the back is, and then this would be the front or the back, and then this is the ridge right in the middle. Right, this is this ridge right in the middle here. So these are already good to go, right? So the reason I know that they're good to go, right, is by doing a quick check. If you go right up here in this little drop down menu, you can do a checker pattern. You can do a check, right? And this is a texture. You can either do the texture pattern or the UV checker. And what this is going to do is you want to make sure that every single thing is an actual box, right? And the reason I like this one is because it actually gives you letters and numbers on there as well. You know, it kind of does everything, because you're trying to check to make sure that these are actual squares, 1 by 1 squares. The B looks like an actual B. The circle is a circle and not an oval, right? So you're looking at these things, and these are going to help you judge to make sure that whenever you get your textures, it isn't going to squash and stretch and go crazy on you. All right, so this is how you would go about checking that. And let me show you what I mean by that. So if my texture was like this, right, and I saw that this was how my texture came in, I would know immediately that there's something wrong with this, right? Another thing that's wrong is here, my text is backwards. So I would need to come in here, right, either scale it down to make sure that it fits, right? Or I could just reset this peel right here, right, to make sure. But now you can see that my text is flipped, right? Looking at this is how my sword is going up and down. This is how my text is. But now it's saying that my texture is flipped. So what I want is I can just take this whole guy right here, just this whole element right here, which is just this face. And then I can right click and I can flip it horizontally. And then I can right click again, flip it vertically. So now I'm making sure that I'm writing in the way that the way that it's supposed to be, right? This is how it's supposed to be naturally. This is going to help you texture, because now when you're texturing, when you're going to write on this, or if you got to throw some stuff or you got to do some text on something, now I know that I can write from left to right and it's going to be correct. Right? So these are the little things that'll help you, right? Of course, if it was flipped and upside down, I could still do it. But this just makes sure that whatever I'm doing, it's going to be flipped in the right way. All right. So making sure, you know, my squares are my squares, that my circles aren't ovals or egg shaped, right? My C is a proper C. Everything is looking good and correct, right? Now I'm going to select this center, right? And this center, because of how it's projecting this information, you can see that it's stretched. So what I want to do is actually I want to break it up. So I'm just going to, and here, the thing about seams is you want to put them where they're not going to be noticeable. So if I put it right here and we're going to do a shot or something and my seam is right here, it might look weird. But if I put it on the bottom, right, if I put my seam on the bottom, we know that if the coin is going to spin on the table, that seam is hidden based on where I put it. So putting your seams in certain places is important for that reason, right? You want to think about where you're putting your seams, and you know, because sometimes you have to put them in unavoidable places. But for best practices, you want to think about how to hide your seams properly. Seam hiding is an art form, right? Putting it to where nobody will even notice, nobody will even think about it. And the thing is, nowadays, you know, software is getting better. Software has gotten a lot better, and they don't handle seams as bad as they used to back in the day, because there'd be a lot of, you know, texture stretching. Because in reality, what's going to happen is, let me break this and show you guys what I'm talking about. Actually, this one, let's just no. Just do it like that, and then I think it's on the Y. So all I did was I did a projection map. So it was starting with a flat map, but I did a projection, and I'm projecting a cylinder, but it's not going to be on the X. I'm going to project it on the Y axis. So now this is where my cylinder is projecting. It's going to project a cylinder over my cylinder, which is going to give me, it's going to break it up that way. So, and the thing is, this also puts a seam somewhere. So I just want to make sure I find wherever that seam is. So if I start rotating my projection here, it'll start to move that seam around, right? You see that seam? That's that seam right there, right? And I want to make sure my seam is at the bottom. All right. So if I select 2, I can select that. So now my seam, look where my seam is. So let's do our projection map. It's at the top. That is not bueno. That's not what we want. So I'm going to select those again. I'm just going to go back to my projection. Y. Usually shows me. It should be. Alright, so here's our seam right here, this green line. So just going to make sure that that seam is at the bottom, just like that. Alright, now that I've made sure my seam is at the bottom, I can deselect this guy. And the reason is, if I didn't deselect it, it wasn't going to let me scale it. So now, let me show you guys about that texture stretching. You see how long this is? But this is a thin, skinny strip, right? If my UV isn't reflecting that, then I've got to fix that. That's my job. My job is to fix that. So now you'll see that I'm going to select it. And then as I start pulling it out like that, you can see that, oh, okay, it's starting to fix itself. All right. One way to do this automatically is to just do a relax, and then just start relax at 1, and it'll, it'll get you there. So now the next thing I want to do is select all of it and then pack them together. I'm going to pack all of these inside of this UV, and this is called our UV space right here, this little square. And UDIMs is another thing that I'll teach you guys. I don't know if you guys, this is modeling 1, you guys probably won't learn anything about UDIMs, but I'm going to pack these together for you. If I pack them together, it's just going to say, all right, this is where all of them should be. But if I pack and normalize them, right, it's going to pack them inside of the UV space for us. All right. So now with something like this, so here is where our dilemma is that we will run into with this project in particular, but it's something to think about. When it comes to texturing, right, it would be better for me if my textures, right, if I'm taking this and I'm exporting it out, it's going to be harder for me to texture something on this than something that is on something like this, right? Because it's easier for me to write. The textures are going to be crisper, it's going to look better, but this is how a lot of students will normally pack it. So you've got to use this space. This is all wasted space. And if what you're going to do is, if you're telling me, all right, whenever I'm done with my arrow, I'm going to do my arrow, I'm going to unwrap my arrow, do a low poly, unwrap it. I'm going to do that same thing for the sword or whatever other ones we've done. I don't even know, the bow and the arrow. And, if you were going to unwrap all of those and put them all in here and you were going to fit them inside of this UV space, then yes, it's okay to leave this space up here. But if that's not going to be the case, and this is going to be all your texturing on this one texture sheet, I promise you, you had better upgrade your UV game and scale it up to give yourself the maximum amount of space possible for you to texture. All right? So that's the idea. That's the idea of basically unwrapping your model right here, right? So now, if you think about it, these guys are now they're in opposites to the texture density of this guy. So these guys will have now more texture density than this guy who's still at that size. So to fix that, what we would need to do is we'd actually need to scale all of them at the same time. So they're keeping the same relative scale to each other. All right. So that's what you're going to do. So I'm going to scale this. I'm going to bring this guy up like that. I'm going to scale it some more. I'm holding down control so that it scales it uniformly. Right. So hopefully you guys are seeing that on no board. So I'm just, just making sure I'm using as much textile density. And you guys are probably like, wait, Ty, that strip is, it's too big, or well, here is what I would do. I would now break this guy, right? Break this guy into either halves or thirds, right? Because now I can utilize that density. And I can even break it one more time, right? I would rather do this. So 3. Right, have my textures like this. Well, let's see. What I might do is instead break them into like just equal parts. So let's select the whole thing. Whoops. All right, just like that. So now I've got my object unwrapped, packed, and in all honesty, right, the thing is, this is wasted space, right? If I had more pieces, I would put, I'd unwrap more pieces and throw them in here. If I had like complementary pieces, so like if I had like a sword, a shield, different things, I would just try to pack as much of it into that one UV space as possible, because the problem with our computer graphics a lot of the times is them loading the textures, right, and the size of the textures that they're loading. So the least amount of textures that these computers have to load, the faster your engines and everything is going to run. So these are little things that you want to keep in mind whenever you're making your models, making sure that, hey, I've got enough polys in here, I've got enough space in here, I've got enough UV texel density in here to texture my model, right? My B is a B, my C is a C. It's not elongated, it's not squashed, it's not stretched. And I feel like I'm having to reiterate this, but it's something that once you guys learn and understand, it'll make you guys better modelers. And there's a lot of forums dedicated just to, topology and unwrapping and the theories behind it, and, how you should set up your islands and UDIMs and what you should categorize together. So if you're finding yourself that you're at this point in, in your modeling career, and you're trying to figure out the best ways to do unwraps, right? Watch this video, go online, find different videos that talk about it, or articles or forums, right? There's a lot of stuff out there. There's a lot of info out there on stuff like this. But yeah, that's it. So now I can just take this guy, right click, convert this guy to an editable poly. Now I've collapsed my new UVs in there. All right. So if Substance Painter will open and work for us, I might be able to do a quick bake before we get out of here. But if it doesn't, then I will figure out how to get it to work, and then we'll do this on Monday. Okay, so no, it's not gonna work. It's just like a white screen. I don't know. It's got this weird bug with multiple displays. So I'll fix that for Monday, and we will do that Monday. So the last thing I'm going to do now instead is I'm just going to show you guys what I'll do to export it out. So I'll select my low poly model here. All right, I'm going to select my low poly, file, export selected, right? Export selected, and we'll call this Zelda. This might take a second to, and then we'll do coin underscore low poly, right? And then Control I can select the inverse, right? Now I've got all of my high poly selected. So now I can do file, export selected, coin underscore high poly. And I'm just using Autodesk Media and Entertainment, hitting OK. And that is it. So next class, what we're going to pick up is we're going to open up Substance Painter. We're going to bring these guys in. We're going to bake out our textures, texture it, and then render it out, and we're gonna have our coin model, right? And then I'll show you guys how to upload it online. Maybe upload it to I can't remember the name of the site. Sketchfab, that's what it's called. All right, yeah, Sketchfab. Sorry about that. Whew, brain fart. It's Friday, so yeah. Yeah, Sketchfab. I'll show you guys how to upload it to Sketchfab, so you have a 3D model that you can show people and say, hey, go check out my coin or something, or go check out my model. You can send it to whoever you want. You can send it, and people can view it on their phones or their emails or whatever. So people know that whenever you're doing this stuff, it's not just random nonsense that So yeah, that's gonna be it. But other than that, yeah, you guys should have a great weekend. Let me know if you guys have any